All right, let's begin. Hi, I'm Kevin. So I am a senior UX designer at Booking.com. I am the co-founder of a startup company called The Wise Assistant. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. I'm a world traveler. I've gone to 41 countries at this point. I love it. I'm currently based in Amsterdam. Here, it's a little bit of a rainy day. A lot of the UX background that I come from is front-end development and accessibility on the web. And I have a lot of my design, trade, and business skills from my mom and my dad, who are fashion designers and a government consultant, previously in labor rights. So let's talk a little bit about my work experience. So how I got into UX is actually through web development. So for the first 3 years, I was building websites, building emails, and then I kind of was like, I really want to get closer to the user, kind of be earlier in the process for problem solving. And so therefore I became a UX designer. So now I've been in people management for about the last 3 years. Before Booking, I was at PwC. I've also been at startups and consulting firms like EY. So yeah, these are all the great companies I've had the esteemed honor and privilege to work for. I'm super happy to now be at Booking.com. So let's kick right off. Let's talk about career paths. So a lot of people don't really talk about how they got into UX. UX has fought very hard to get to the table. It's a newer kind of industry, a newer field. I started off as a print designer, doing graphic design, doing marketing collateral, flyers, banners for booths, things like that. Got into web design pretty quickly so I could expand my client base, make more money. And then I started doing instructional design. From there, I actually started doing a lot more communication design, email, newsletters, things that would convert kind of like prospective customers into customers for financial clients, small businesses, and the like. And then I got into my mom's business as a digital creative director. And then it got really exciting and fun. From there, I got into data visualization. So I worked at the Brookings Institution in DC, did lots of long form data viz, kind of converting very long research studies into exciting, interactive, clickable prototypes and stories that told themselves on the screen, kind of really getting into how UX really interprets or affects and influences people understand information, retain that information, etc. I then launched my second startup at the time. From there, learned a lot more about what users want, what users need. Started working mostly on mobile apps, became a mobile UI designer, and then as you can see, kind of ended up pretty strongly in UX and product design. Became very senior, was a principal for a small stint in California for about 2 years, and then I've been leading UX design for 2 different products at Booking.com for the last year, where I also lead the strategy of our company, of the company's vision for online checkout. So let's talk about how you get into the industry. It all starts with a hunch or a hypothesis. So we, as designers or problem solvers of the business, or let's say you get some direct customer feedback, through customer service, complaints, or reviews, we believe that by creating a certain experience for a certain persona, a certain type of user, we will achieve X, Y, Z. And this is really the start of how you kind of develop and create your user experience. A lot of times people kind of feel a little bit worried about getting into UX or making this career change. Growth Tribe and I have actually developed a really strong 12-week course that you can sign up for. But just to get over that initial hump, that fear, let's talk about imposter syndrome. People assume that what they know about a field or something they're passionate about isn't enough and everyone knows so much more. In reality, there's massive overlap. And there's also this reality that everyone's still learning. So let's just get started, start from today and take one step at a time. So you don't need a degree. I didn't have a degree, actually. I worked as a print designer, web designer, and kind of worked my way in. I love this quote from Tatiana. Super great, you don't need a degree in a certain field to become a UX researcher. Same thing applies for designers. And so I like to call out certain things in this quote. So just make sure that you can do a boot camp or get experience working for a client or a friend or a freelance. And make sure that you realize it isn't just a work experience. It could be, things for fun, UX challenges, and more. So we'll start with a little quiz because UX started with HCI. So back in the early 70s, as computers got really fun, the Apple and Mac days of innovation, people started using personal computers. So then they're like, how do we make sure this is a usable, fun, kind of effective experience? A little water. Cool. So yeah, let's get started. So some of the key elements for what makes human-computer interaction very successful is obviously partly the design. Then we get into ethnography, so really being able to understand like humans and their needs and their wants. Computer science, obviously, we're working with computers and technology. Psychology, so you understand how people process information, make choices, understand their emotions. Language, sociology, ergonomics of human factors. So again, kind of like the dexterity of your thumb and things that actually impact your kind of physical experience with the technology or the application of the product or the service. The engineering, how that product or service actually operates. And then semiotics, which really focuses on, again, this kind of like interaction layer. You should really think about all of your products from a user point of view. And these are the kind of factors that you should keep in mind. So UX never ends. So there's always this talk of like, oh, this is the process, but processes usually have some kind of limitation or end. And as you can see here, this is a cycle at the very end. It's optimization. If you're a large company, you spend all your time just making improvements, doing better. You start with design thinking. You have a problem, you think about it from both the user perspective, the business perspective, making sure that it's viable, feasible, and desirable. And then you go into lean UX where you actually start iterating, exploring, experimenting, testing. And then through Agile software development, you actually put it in the real world and see if those hypotheses are accurate, make some changes, and keep testing and experimenting. So let's talk really quickly about why UX is so important and how the field has so much room to grow and for plenty of room for you to join. So UX is super important so that we can predict and measure the journey of our users, when they're happy, when they're unhappy, how we can help them, how we can convert people who are looking for a solution to their problems to our product, our service, our brand, and then also retain them. Helps us reduce the costs, increase value so that ROI goes up, then improve findability. So if the product is really good, if it has good user experience, generally it's talked about more, it's shared more, the organic traffic is a bit higher. We also can differentiate from the competition, other products in the same space, or the same solution. We'll lose to a company that has really good UX. And then obviously, I think a lot of us get into this field so that we can actually lead innovation. Groundbreaking simplification, being known for making the iPod. These are some of the best UX wins that you can attribute to both the company and the team behind it that designed that product. So UX is a huge field. We talk a lot about like different labels in the field. People kind of have throwaway labels, but as a UX designer, you are a Swiss Army knife. So whether you're cross-functional and you're more of a product designer, whether you specialize and you work just on motion design or interaction, there's lots of ways to cut up the pie. I always recommend that people, hone their ability to understand people, because empathy is the core of all of this. And then, if you really want to master all of this, then maybe you'll start calling you like a 10x designer or a unicorn. So let's quickly talk about this, becoming a unicorn. I love this term. Because this is always what I imagine in my head. It's like, oh, there's the guy who has like this unicorn head, and he can code and design and write and knows all psychology, and it's not realistic. So let's just talk about the different pieces here. So becoming a unicorn or becoming like a very well-rounded cross-functional UX designer means that you have honed your craft and ability to use research, analyze that data that comes back from the research, that you understand how to do content strategy or collaborate very well or manage copywriters and content strategists, that you understand the logical and intuitive flow of where things should go in the navigation, the layout of a page, the layout of a structure, such as a sitemap or information architecture, for a product or app or even a space. If you want to flex a little more into like the business side and being able to actually lead strategy, you have a very good sense of digital product management. And then back to some of the core crafts of interaction design, visual design, and then if it's a digital product, front-end development. But what is extremely, extremely important is that you understand human ergonomics, human factors. Humans are, they have patterns, and if you can design for that, it's really important. So what is a unicorn, or what we call a cross-functional UX designer? Me? No. This is a screenshot from my website. So as you see here, I kind of have like 4 of those boxes that I've really had enough years of like performing, getting better at, to offer them as a service, as a principal or lead UX designer. So user experience design, making sure people love the products we make, the improvements we make to existing products. The UI has to be very usable, intuitive, and accessible. Making sure that the ideas kind of make it from the idea stage all the way through execution and launch and optimization by helping and kind of like flexing over into product management. And then last but not least, I usually work for tech companies who make consumer products or B2B products, and therefore a lot of them are coded. And by speaking the language of my development team, it speeds up life cycles as far as getting the idea out on the from the page into the consumer hands. So I love this quote from the former CEO and now the executive chair of IDEA, Tim Brown. A T-shaped designer has this principal skill. So we want to talk about how you can have depth in one particular thing, but be a generalist everywhere else. So have a good understanding of these different things that make up really good product design, really good business, really good experiences. So here at Growth Drive, we like to talk about, what does that look like in reality? So breaking down the earlier chart, for the design perspective, you think about user research, UI, interaction. You might go a little deeper as a UX designer and do clipboard prototypes, converting those wireframes into things you put into the hands of customers for usability testing, for feedback, for empathy testing, for collaborating with people who have the problem to help them design their own solutions. Obviously, you have design systems, visual design, usability test. There's microcopy and tons of copy in UI to actually perfect, convert, help the user, and then you can stitch all together with user flows. But then how do we make sure this is like a valuable solution? Then you have this top layer, and you make sure that you thought about the problem correctly, that you're kind of targeting the right needs, that the business is supported, that you're tracking the right metrics, and everything else that makes sure that it's a successful and lovable product in the long term. So if you're getting started in UX, what will you mostly be doing? So if you work at a startup, you'll be wearing very, very many hats. You'll be taking everything from customer feedback and ideas from your CEO and your C-suite into reality. You'll have your own ideas. You'll be doing parts of the research. You'll be doing sketching and wireframes and testing and all of that. And then as you go up, you tend to do more and more, but in a certain area. So I like to call out that most of the time, my job entails less wireframe and sketching, more journey mapping, more persona development, design systems so that this is scalable, so that big, large, disparate, multi-location teams that are developers can actually execute your design, planning for certain scenarios or unhappy paths, and then making sure that product management is smooth. From there, you have to make sure it's optimized to convert so that all the time you spend on the design, the research, the testing and development actually pays dividends to the business. And then obviously stakeholder management so that you can actually expand and keep the customers happy. So let's talk about what UX today looks like. 2020 has changed a lot, and I think the position for UX designer has actually grown. So one of my favorite quotes, I used to work in San Francisco within the office at Pivotal Labs, which is done by Agile. Former CEO and now the chairman, Paul Moritz, said this: "It's about catching customers in the act and providing highly relevant, highly contextual information." And this is super important because as designers, sometimes people fixate on user interface and how things look, but it's also important that people understand everything, that it's at the right time, that it's actually creating the impact that you intended. So why is UX so important when it's done correctly? So every dollar invested in UX moves and creates and comes back with $100. Now for business, this is super important. This is why UX is such a growing field. This is why there's a seat at the table for UX. UX designers are becoming C-suites of certain companies. They're also getting lots of positions. Salary ranges are getting higher and higher. But it's super important we realize why we're so impactful. So the companies that have really invested in their design teams and UX are definitely winning. If they care about the finances at the bottom line, the finances are definitely showing that investment in UX is super important, and the ROI is great. So let's talk about which companies are known for their UX. There shouldn't be any surprise here, but this is a global list, but I'm also American, so I'll try to contextualize all of these. You have Duolingo, an amazing company and app that helps people learn new languages. They're known for their notifications that kind of like peer pressure you into opening the app and kind of learning a little more Spanish today, or a little more Portuguese, or a little more Brazilian Portuguese. And so you can get, there's like a myriad of languages they have, and they've really been known for not the languages, but actually the prompts and the accountability. Of course, there's Apple. So Apple is just known for their UX across the board, both in the hardware, the intuitiveness, the cleanliness, the simplicity, the minimalism, but also the software they built, especially the iPhone, of course. Then one people don't always expect, but Mailchimp, right? This is a company that is in a very crowded space. They send transactional and marketing emails. There's probably 50 companies that do this, but they really last a span of time. They do a really great job with the look and feel, the branding of their monkey. They have a year in review. They launch every single year, and they have a very great grasp on copy, tone of voice, which really pushes their UX to the next level. Disney obviously has lasted for so long. They have the ability to expand from animation to their theme parks, Disney Plus. Their UX has been performing for decades. Ikea, which is a ubiquitous global furniture player. Their app is great for when you're in the store. The UX of the actual store has been a huge success for them internationally. I think we all know an experience at Ikea. It's genuinely a good one, and may end in meatballs. Then you have Google. There's enough said there. Uber has really transformed transportation. Spotify has transformed music, user recommendations, and then Airbnb has really transformed homes. Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, and one of the co-founders, actually credits UX for the reason why the company got from $0 to $10 billion, and then from $10 billion to $30 billion. Yeah, UX is super important. So UX today kind of has changed a little bit. Usually we talk about feasibility, desirability, viability. Let's talk a little bit more about how we produce products that are ethical. Just because we can build a product or can build this solution or this service, should we? Are the outcomes what we intended? And if they aren't, are we actually changing them? Are we actually going to refactor or roll back a change? Are we going to pivot if something works really well, but is not necessarily what the world needs right now? So core values are super important, then technology, humans, and the business. So let's talk about how you as a new UX center actually get experience, get your foot in the door, get some work. There's multiple ways. One of my favorite is mentorship. If you don't have a mentor, I highly suggest you get one. Just reach out. People are more than willing to help. Senior designers, principal designers, heads of design oftentimes are willing to help if people just ask. On top of that, there's a ton of books. I have a link here for Ann Dye's list of UX books. They're amazing. This is an updated list. So these are the most recent books for Do Not Make Me Think, amongst others that are not just classics, but also coming out this year from companies like A Book Apart and some of my friends. So there's also this huge trend now. There's been Dribble, there's been all these different platforms. All of them have sparked these challenges. So you have a 30-day UI challenge. There's also 30-day UX challenges. So UXchallenge.co has a list of really good real-world experiences, real-world problems that you can solve and show off your UX capabilities, keep your portfolio fresh, and add new work so that you can get hired, get your first job, get new clients, and more. And while degrees are great at universities, let's say you don't have the years and the thousands of dollars to do that, I highly suggest boot camps, like Growth Tribe. And then obviously there's networking at events, and events have gone online now, so there's plenty that you can be doing during COVID and even after to stay connected on LinkedIn and more. Of course, you can always add me as a start. So one of the reasons why I really, really like calling out mentorship is because I'm a big advocate of mentorship. So these are two people that I've mentored. As you can see on the left, very successful, both of them. Here you have Elle. Elle was working in geospatial. She really wanted to get into UX. She thought it was too late in her career, too late in maybe her life. But no, she was super motivated and passionate, reached out to me, and now she leads UX on a team at Capital One. On the right, you have Perry, who was working in academia, really amazing researcher, really great friend, and then moved from academia to McKinsey, and now is a senior user researcher there. So you can really make these big jumps if you just get started today. And let's talk about networking. Generally, networking sounds like boring and unfun. Obviously things have changed quite a bit now that we are mostly at our homes, but I used to be a part of a big community called Epicurrents. Hopefully it comes back soon. There's UXPA, there's the User Experience Professional Association. They have events online and in person all over the world. You have the World Usability Congress, which is really a global congress and convention. They're going to be online this year. It's going to be much more affordable than going in person, and they're back in person next year. Highly recommend that. There's also Design X, which is a massive community. Used to be a combination of Ladders and Design X Europe. So they're a Slack community, over 5,000 designers and leaders and researchers. Highly recommend you reach out to them, join the community in Slack, really great resource there. Plus there's UXStrat, which is both in person and online in Europe and in the US and North America. So let's talk about the tools. This is what it feels like when you kind of look up user research. There's tools for everything. This is just the tools that are most popular within the research communities and the design communities. I use 18 of these on a weekly basis, so there's definitely some learning curves, but I think people should really focus on Miro and Figma, being able to explain your thoughts, get them from your head into a visual, then from there being able to get it to a UI, prototype, test it, iterate, and a lot of those same skill sets used for the Figma tool applied to Sketch or Adobe XD, kind of these modern UI UX tools that are really becoming the leaders and kind of like an all-in-one platform. I also recommend checking out user testing, Usability Hub, being really good at Notion or producing wikis or documentation for your work is important. There's also, of course, tools I use such as Proto.io, Dropbox, Drive, and more. So this is my day usually looks like. It's Miro, Figma, flow map is how I kind of organize user flows, create kind of clickable prototypes that have to be shown to developers to show them the flow and the changes and the different options and pathing. Proto.io so that you can actually have the look and feel of a real product, so you can do user inputs and typing in a prototype, which is a little bit of a step up above from Figma. And Envision, Zeppelin for developer handoffs or components, fonts, design systems. If you want that kind of separation between your workspace and the handoff. Usability Hub for usability testing and user research. Envision for both mood boards, UI design, design systems, and more. And user testing for large scale usability, accessibility, and qualitative and quantitative testing. And that really concludes what I think would get you started in the UX field. I highly recommend that you join the 12-week cross-functional UX course by Growth Tribe. And also you can follow me online. right, great. Those are some questions we see here in the chat. So Christopher Evans. So you're talking about this transition from front end to UX. People take you seriously. Do they see you as a guy that can only talk to computers? How do you gain that reputation, respect, professional standing to be able to put yourself forward and say, I'm a UXer, hire me? I love this question. So as someone who is converting from front end to UX design, getting taken seriously, reputation obviously is important. Oftentimes there are stigmas and stereotypes about people's professions and backgrounds. Really what got me into it was writing. All of that writing is no longer online, but I think the really important thing for a UX designer is to be able to explain their process of taking in empathy and input and feedback, maybe like public research that's been done by Forrester or online that you can find, and being able to convert kind of like this general knowledge of a topic into a hypothesis, creating a UI, whether it's a sketch on paper or on a whiteboard or mock-up, and then getting feedback. So being, just going to 5 friends, 5 coworkers, 5 neighbors, a coffee shop, or some kind of context where you can find a customer or user who can relate to the problem and get some feedback, and then kind of documenting that process. Oftentimes just, creating little self-projects for little things that are annoying in the house, like the remote or a coffee machine or something like that, shows that a developer is really trying to get more into user experience. I did that. I also went to local businesses, such as like hair salons, barbershops, flower shops, took some like smaller, more niche, more specific, and let's say small cut solutions or problems, and made solutions for them, and really, was able to show results. And that's what got me my first UX contract. Do I recommend a specific code language for UX? I actually don't. This is a really debated topic. I actually don't have a strong recommendation that UX designers need to know how to code. I think it's important to understand how code works. So let's say there's some basic foundations. A lot of code right now is based on JavaScript. If you can understand or learn more about JavaScript, it helps with working with React, which is super popular right now. If you understand HTML and CSS, you get marketing websites, you get acquisition funnels, and analytics tools like Segment or Amplitude will really help you as far as understanding how you can track metrics or how metrics maybe are getting missed. And that's kind of more important than actually being an expert at any one language. So there's a question here from a web developer who is trying to make this transition in their career. They want this. They're a bit confused. They're trying to choose between growth marketing and UX. So this is great. I think it depends really what you want. I think growth marketing is an amazing industry as well as UX. Obviously, I'm biased towards UX. If you're really trying to focus on customers early in the funnel, I think that you want to get into user experience. Growth marketing is really amazing for increasing the funnel, getting more attention for a business or a product, but you're not actually making changes if they have complaints or there are improvements to make to the product itself. You're mostly working on the messaging, acquisition, and brand promise for rapid growth. So I think that's a pretty big choice to make when I look at both. Great question here about have I ever worked on products that are aimed at an older audience? Definitely. So I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with some of the founders over at Honor, which is a San Francisco-based kind of like elder care product. So scheduling care providers to come to your home or house, being able to interview them, vet them, change them, schedule them, pay them, all of that. I've also just in general, all the products I worked on have generally been for everyone. So whether it was for Capital One or Facebook or Uber, I mean, it's not just young people who take cars or use the internet or post selfies or, so oftentimes it's really important to make sure that the research team has a diverse set of users to pull from. If you're doing B2B or B2C or B2B2C, it's super important that in all the different levels of research, you're getting a diverse audience based on race, gender, age, nationality, first language spoken, things like that, anything that could maybe impact how they experience the product. So I definitely had that experience. Most notably, the best company I've worked for on this topic has been Capital One. see, we have some more questions. Okay, so this is a super common thing. So some jobs for UX try to ask that a person be really good at everything from user research through prototyping through front-end development, knowing how to code as being like a core tenet or a core part of the job. I would say oftentimes, job descriptions go way beyond what they should, and are oftentimes a bit wrong. I say apply. Apply, find out what they actually mean, find out what they actually want. If they are looking for someone to do 3 jobs, then hopefully they're paying what looks like a 3-job salary. Oftentimes they're just looking for someone who understands the wide breadth and is more like T-shaped, so they can kind of be in conversations or be in the meeting with the marketing team, with the development team, with business development, but they're really gonna go back and do UX deliverables, such as wireframing, prototyping, testing, and then optimization of the UI once it's been developed. So it's a bit different than what it says online, but I wouldn't be deterred or scared by it. Can I give some examples of bad UX design? So this is always a fun one. You're attacking people's designs without having the full context. You oftentimes will see UI or UX redesigns of products or solutions that are in the world. And then, you find out later on they have a very legitimate reason. And, say 80% of customers are complaining about something, they're going to change it. It might deter a certain user group, but that isn't maybe their target audience. There's also this kind of like caveat that once you put a feature out in the world, some companies really have to spend lots of time, sustaining that, even if it's no longer good. Look at Internet Explorer 8 or 9, still being used by millions of customers, even though they've moved far, far beyond that product to better UX. So some bad experiences, I would say that I can think of immediately. Because of COVID, I think we're exposing lots of bad user experiences. I think one of my favorite is Starbucks, just because a lot of us know it. Just getting your name wrong as a known brand issue, because the UX of how they operationalize getting orders, passing it down the line, writing your name on it at the very end, and it being wrong is just now part of the funny kind of culture they have, but definitely is a UX problem they could have fixed a long time ago. Are there any book tips to read more about UX design? Yeah, so I will include below, and there's even, I can go back in the slides, but Ann Dye on Medium has a UX books for 2020. So beyond, Do Not Make Me Think, there's a really great book by Aaron Walter for Design for Emotion. There's great books by, I think her name is Jenny Zhao, which is The Making of a Manager. I think it's super important that you understand kind of like the career life cycle of a UX designer and decide if you want to be working with clients and be individual contributor the entire time, or you want to get into UX management and kind of plan very long-term multi-year projects within UX. And if that's what you want to go to, making steps to get into that world early on and knowing that is super important. Although you can always just change that whenever you get down to the line, 2 or 3 years, and kind of like make steps based on how you feel then. So, question from Shay about how I differentiate between user experience design, customer experience design, and human-centered design. Because a lot of people like to interchange them. Yeah, I love this. This is something that we'll be talking about later today with the new director of design at Facebook, Angela Steger, which is, she's super known for growth design. Oftentimes people mix up or confuse UX design, product design, human-centered design. Human-centered design should be the base process or the baseline foundation for all design. It could be architecture, it could be interior design. So honestly, this should not be a job title, in my opinion, for a UX designer. It's kind of like, are you good at putting the human or the customer at the center of your design process? And if you are, then you're able to kind of be a better designer. For the UX versus CX conversation, I often actually talk about this. So a company can produce a product and that product gets used by people who are both paying for it and not paying for it. Oftentimes you're actually producing products mostly for the people who are not paying for it, like let's say Facebook. In reality, the customer for Facebook are the advertisers, or the data collectors, or the data distributors, and the other users are just like you and me who are not paying for it. So I think customer experience actually goes a little bit bigger than UX. So you're including both user bases, the paying and non-paying. You're including any partners, any providers, any kind of collaborators, and any kind of infrastructure like customer service, the call center, the App Store review, anything like that that actually impact the business as well. So it's a bit broader than maybe just the individual product's user experience. Any advice on how to work on customer experience, for example, at Ikea? Training, job entry point. Any resources on anthropology and customer care, success, satisfaction? Is UX a good entry point in product design? Great, these are all great questions from Ivan, love it. So UX is an extremely, extremely valuable entry point for customer experience. I think at the core of any business, there is one or more user groups that represents, let's say, represents like the reason why they exist and they're well known. I mean, the idea that we actually have more than one user is super important to realize as a user experience designer. Let's say at booking.com, we're oftentimes designing for the traveler, for the guest, whether they're browsing or they've actually paid, but we're also kind of course, keeping in mind the partners and the vendors. So the hotel operators, the people who own their homes and are doing rentals when they're on vacation, the people who actually process the payments and credit cards. So there's a lot of different users to keep in mind, besides just who's actually paying us directly for our known services such as booking the apartment or booking the flight. As far as resources, I would say the book list from Ann Dye, A-N-N-E-D-A-I, is probably the best list to go to. I think that once you kind of get a little bit more understanding of the different subsegments, such as information architecture or human factors, you can find multiple overlaps or entry points into CX. Let's say at Ikea, they have the app, but they also have apps that the store managers, the employees use to find all the goods, let's say back of house, they use to restock the kitchen, things like that. There's also like in-house products, internal services that you would design at Ikea beyond just, let's say, the user shopper facing products. Cool. Joe Rubio has a great question. This really ties into stakeholder management. So can I give some insights on how to convince a company to prioritize UX? I think it is a long road. It is part of everyone's job. I think that to be a UX designer at a company that does not prioritize its customers is probably like a pre-2000. So as part of the digital transformation wave, there's been lots of prioritization for user experience. I think it's super important that if you're at a company that, let's say, wants to cut testing or cut down on research time, or doesn't give you that time, I think you should pull out the differences between who are the winners in the space and their process. You can pull up lots of really great detailed articles about design at Facebook, at Uber, at Airbnb, and at Spotify to kind of make your case. It helps with the industry that you're kind of working in. You can find a competitor and who's doing better. And generally, they're very vocal about why they're doing better. As far as insights go, I've definitely fought a lot of battles to get UX, let's say, a seat at the table or a bigger seat, or more importantly, just kind of like the funding it needs. UX at large companies often get split between design, copy, and research. So oftentimes design is getting overfunded or more funding than the other two. And so it's really important that as UX designers, we are strong advocates for research. As human-centered designers, as good UX designers, we should be advocating for getting more data, not just once at the beginning of the process, but actually, let's say a bi-weekly basis or as often as possible. So we're really kind of internalizing the approach of Agile, leaving behind the waterfall, where we do things in like little phases and never go back to them. It should really be like a consistent cycle of getting input, feedback, research, experimenting, and then continuously getting customer input and feedback and experimenting. I think that if, let's say, you need a small win to kind of prove this to a company, it's important that you kind of also flex that muscle of digital product management. You can make a small business case for why doing it a certain way gives you more data or cleaner data, and that would help them convince leadership to invest in the time and the money it takes to do UX correctly. I'm gonna go through a couple more questions. So I mentioned earlier in the talk that as a UX designer, you wear many hats. I think it's super important that people understand that UX design overlaps with quite a few different industries. I actually don't mind going back and showing that. Give me 1 second. I think it's worth it. Yeah, so I'll bring this up because again, I do believe the UX designers at the end of the day wear many hats, and we have to be kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It does not mean replace or are experts in all of these different crafts. As you can see for most of these are overlaps. So there's definitely a need for a dedicated, experienced, marketing team, marketing individual who can actually bring in that specific craft, that scope, that understanding, but they collaborate with user experience designers so that there is not this disconnect between marketing and the UX. So what you say to the customer in an ad or on Facebook or through endorsements from influencers should really hold up to what they see in the experience once they land on your product or your website. So there's oftentimes this disconnect between really emotional, really like kind of triggering in a positive way, product advertising, product marketing, and then you get to the experience and it's so minimal that there's no emotion anymore, that the conversion kind of has like killed some of the brand vibe, tone of voice, and some of the values. And so there's really a big space for UX designers to stitch that gap. As far as like conversion rate optimization, conversion rate isn't the only thing, right? So kind of talking earlier about the ethics and the desirability. So if it's super feasible, it's viable, it's making lots of money, good profit margins, it really allows you the space, right? To say, oh, this is really important to us. Nike does this, Apple does this. This is gonna cost us more money, this will be less profitable, but it helps people understand what we stand for. And that's a really big space for a UX designer to kind of like influence a company to think that way. And this, obviously overlaps a little bit into branding and business development and strategy and BD. So UX, again, wears many hats, but I would say we still have like our T-shaped kind of core area of focus, despite kind of bleeding over into these different areas. It's a great question here from Camilla. So Camilla is joining the UX course that I'm giving next month, which I love to hear, but does not have a technical background, which I think it's honestly better that way. And I'll explain why in 1 second. She asks, is there a good resource to start getting a good understanding or overview of the software development language and lifecycle? I think a lot of it comes down to maybe some jargon, some terms. I do dedicate a very significant portion of the class to teaching all these different terms and what they mean and the differences there are in different companies, different sizes, different countries. But as a prep, I actually would look at some of the resources and materials kind of created by the companies themselves. So if you are really interested in product management or understanding that better to do a better job as a UX designer, it's super important that you actually check out the resources provided by Jira and Atlassian, who's the owner of Jira and Trello. They have lots of great resources and tools to explain what a sprint is, what a bug, what bug bashing is, what tasks and stories are, and the difference between them, and how to do story points and all these kind of different terms and different meanings. I would start there. I then would also look at some of the articles by the Nielsen Norman Group. So, Don Norman is the founding father of UX and does a really good job explaining and breaking down some of these different terms that are used by researchers, designers, and copywriters within UX. Question here from Miroslav. I love this question. I'm a big advocate of helping junior designers. There's not enough space, not enough time given to kind of help people who are new to the field. Resources for finding remote UX jobs, I think a lot of them I actually have tried myself. Oftentimes, I would actually just talk to local businesses. Obviously, as we are kind of in this COVID world, or a bit remote, you can do it via email. You can do this via networking on LinkedIn. There's also some great communities like DesignX that are online. And then there's uxbeginner.com that gives you tips and tricks and has a Slack community where you can get advice and meet other kind of like junior designers, but also get mentorship from senior and principal designers. And then, there's a question here around what are some of the transferable skills, tricks and tips from other industries that are really applicable and come over into UX. So again, this graphic is a perfect example. I oftentimes make this joke, but it's very true, that the closer you work to the customer, the better you are at maybe converting into user experience as an industry or field. The reason why I say this actually is, let's say that you work in customer service. You spend a lot of your time, whether it's online or at a call center, or it's in person at a physical store or a restaurant, you spend a lot of time talking to customers, right? They are emotive and are very clearly communicating their problems, the experiences that are not so great about a product, service, or a company or a brand. And if you're going to constantly be hearing feedback, you're maybe well equipped to kind of come up with ideas to solve that feedback. Famously, there's been some people, like companies, who have kind of like reported up through their managers, through the chain, and gotten corporate to make that change. But also as a UX designer or someone who's interested in it, you could do designs yourself and actually kind of show them the change you want to make. So I would say some of the transferable skills are kind of like storytelling, speaking publicly, the ability to kind of conduct research or write scripts for research, so writing surveys. It's also really good if you have any skill sets in business development or making a business plan to kind of show the value or maybe the expected return on investment for making a certain change. Like, oh, doing this will save us thousands of dollars, or doing this will make customers happier by X amount. And as a prediction, getting that kind of like tested is of course the next step. I love this question from Isabel about how do you get traditional management to start thinking about UX and to actually act in a more customer-centric way. I've kind of answered this kind of briefly, but I think I can kind of go a little bit more deeper on this topic. I think oftentimes you need to make the case for whatever reason the business kind of is focused on. So let's say in growth years, the company is more interested or more open to the idea of big bets. So they're making investments in things that have low confidence, low risk first, those kind of like low hanging fruit. And then there's low confidence, high risk, which are things that you really need to like be the champion for, the advocate for, and kind of like really bring home as far as like, you think about it for multiple days, you kind of are probably one of the people who are impacted negatively by something not being great or good. And then you actually make the case from a personal point of view to that business. It's also really important to kind of think about how people make decisions, because companies are run by people. So there's pathos, ethos, and logos. So you're making sure this is an ethical change, that this is a change that doesn't have massive negative impact for the finances of the business, and that it's an emotional connection to either like the brand promise, what the brand stands for, or people know the brand is usually kind of targeting. So at Apple, if all of a sudden someone was like, oh, let's do, I don't know, bright green computers, I think like this is an area where someone might say, oh, the phones are colorful now, we should make the laptops colorful. This could be a bit of a small change in your mind, but a big change if companies have already tested out that that doesn't work. So it's important to know kind of like the industry knowledge, some market research when you're making changes like this. But for traditional management and marketing, I mean, I think that you just look for other competitors that are doing what you're saying that that company should do. And usually it works out really well because you're kind of creating this brand envy in the same category, the same vertical as that company is. And they maybe will look closer at that idea. Question from Blaze. If you work as a product marketer and go between doing marketing and UX, what skills should you start developing within UX first? The context is for business to business, B2B, SaaS, which is software as a service. You can that for 1 second. Okay, great. So for someone who is oftentimes doing both marketing and UX, oftentimes you're kind of being involved in content requirements, in message and tone. You're probably also going to be focusing on kind of like the intended impact. So the same kind of process I would say applies. And I don't know if all marketers do this, but actually looking at a wide range of competitors, whether the company is a competitor or a very specific product they offer competes in some way with an offering of your company, is a super important way to see how existing messaging that's been tested or released actually performs. It's also really good to see how much organic traffic versus kind of like paid traffic you get, and how the UX can improve is actually kind of converting some of that expensive paid traffic into more kind of organic, natural traffic to the business, to the product, and then being able to test the messages out as much as possible, whether it's headlines, the imagery you use, and all of that is really UX, but it's kind of in the marketing lens. Other skill sets I would really kind of invest in is learning how to use the kind of like hypothesis scientific process within marketing. So again, another layover from the UX world of HCI. So being able to test individually, if I change this one color or this one word or this one image, what the impact is, so that you can kind of better predict in the future what large changes will kind of positively or negatively impact the business. Yeah, and I think we're just about at time, so that is it for today. And I thank you so much. Please sign up for the 12-week cross-functional UX course. Thanks for all the questions.